chapter 18. This opening part of the final chapter of the Gita has been dominated by a discussion of action, the results of action in the form of karma, and also renunciation of action. And that obviously started from the question that posed by Arjuna in the opening verse of the chapter, in which he asked about renunciation of action. Is it? And Krishna, okay, so you can hear, all right. Yes, and the point that Krishna has been making is really a reassertion of the idea of karma yoga, which was first presented back in chapter 2 of the Gita, by saying that real renunciation isn't directly related to the physical giving up of physical activity, because he says you can't stop acting as long as you're embodied and living in this world. You have to act, you have to feed yourself, and you just can't stop. The body is by nature active. Therefore, renunciation, tyaga or sannyas, takes place within the mind. It is effectively a state of consciousness. And in fact, Krishna urges that proper actions, karyam karma, niyatam karma, the actions that we are duty bound to perform, must be carried on, but they should be done, enacted in a mood of renunciation, not desiring and not being attached to the results. Now, in verse 14, Krishna said that there are 5 causal factors that produce the results of action, which are the circumstances in which the action is performed, the individual who is performing the action, the instruments that are available, and the degree of endeavor. That's 4. And then finally there is daiva, which is destiny, which is the 5th causal factor. Now, and then in verse 15, the last verse we looked at last week, it was said that whenever an action is performed, be it with your body, with your words, speech, or even with the mind, it is these 5 causal factors that produce the outcome of that performance of action. Now, in verse 16, Krishna talks about those who don't understand this view. And he says that such a person he describes as durmati. Mati means, it's related to the word for mind, and dur means poor or false or wrong, so wrong-minded persons. And the last line is napashyati. Such wrong-minded persons don't properly see or understand the world. So he says tatraivam sati kartaram atmanam kevalam tuyah. A person, one who sees tatra in that regard, on that subject. Tatra, it means there, or there, on that subject, which is the causes of the outcome of action. Tatra evam sati, there may be kartaram atmanam kevalam. Only the doer of action, only himself is the performer of action. In other words, the durmati is one who sees not the 5 causal factors that have been presented, but atmanam kevalam, only the atman. Kevala means only, alone. So what does that mean? And there's 2 ways of reading this verse, or possibly more than 2. But what does atmanam mean? Of course, it can be the atman, the spiritual part of our existence, but that doesn't, to my mind anyway. And some of the commentators do follow that line, that they see only the individual atman as performing action. And Ramanuja, being a theistic commentator, he says that means that the durmati is one who sees only the atman as a performer of action and ignores the idea of divine control over action, divine supervision of action. So he thinks, I'm only myself only my Atman is performing these actions, ignoring the control exerted by the deity. But my feeling is here that there is a more general meaning to it, that Atman can mean myself. And what Krishna is saying here is, because the spiritual Atman never performs any action, and the Dharmati wouldn't have any knowledge of the spiritual nature of the Atman. So what I think the Gita is saying here is that the Dharmati, the foolish person who lacks true knowledge, thinks, I alone am the maker of my own destiny. I have caused myself all these things to take place. In other words, and we may cast our minds back to chapter 16, where Krishna gave us the words or the thoughts of the Asuric person who says, Idamadya Maya Labdam. This today has been gained Maya by me. Idam Prapshe Manoratam. I will gain this more, this in the future more. And I think the point there was that the foolish person, the Dharmati, thinks of himself as creating all the outcomes and ignores, overlooks the other causal factors. I alone have created this situation. I have gained so much wealth. It's all down to me, and thus takes great pride in the achievements, however modest those achievements might be. I've done this myself, whereas the point has already been made in verse 14 that there are a whole load of, there are other factors as well. There is the situation available to you. There is the type of effort you can make, the instruments of action, and there is also destiny. So if we think with pride, I have done this, I have gained this much wealth, then that's why it's Dharmati, because there is also karma. There is also the position that we find ourselves in, which has allowed us to achieve so much. So I think that's what's being meant here, rather than it could. The other possible meaning is that the Atman is not the performer of action, it's simply the witness. But what I think is being said here is that the Dharmati, the person who lacks proper knowledge, ignores the other factors and thinks of himself alone as being the cause of all outcomes. In other words, thinks of himself or herself as controlling the world. I will achieve this. I will do that. I will make the efforts. I. And I think that's what's being said here, that ignoring other factors, this idea of pride in, I've achieved so much, I've done this, but you ignore the fact that, your destiny has been propitious. You were born into a very wealthy family, and you therefore have so many advantages in succeeding materially in life. So you have to consider as well, and not say it's all down to me and my great ability to have achieved this. Therefore Krishna says, Tatraivam sati kartaram atmanam kevalatuya pasyat yakrita buddhitvan. And why does he see the world in this way? Because of akrita buddhitva. Because buddhitva means intelligence, understanding, and akrita means wrong understanding, because he doesn't have this knowledge that's just been given of the 5 causal factors, and therefore he thinks of himself as the sole controller of the world, his destiny, outcomes. He's a self-made person. He is controlling all things, and makes no allowance for the other factors. Okay, tatraivam sati kartaram atmanam kevalam tuya pasyatya krita buddhitvan nasa pasyati dharmatihi. And the dharmati, such a wrong-minded person, nasa pasyati, he doesn't see things in the proper way. Nasa pasyati dharmatihi. Now, next verse going on, which is 17, which is the contrast to the dharmati. Yasya na hankrito bhavo buddhirnasyana lipyate. The other type of person is, and I think this ties in with the explanation I've just given of the previous verse, yasya nahankrito bhavo. So ahankrita bhavo means I am the doer. And you see why I've interpreted 16 in the way that I did, because ahankritam is related to ahankara, which can mean pride. I am the controller. I am the doer. I am the center of my universe. And that's the view of the Dharmati. But the view of the right-minded person, who is krita buddhitva, who has his understanding properly established, is yasya nahankrito bhavo, na ahankrita bhava. His bhava, his state of mind, his state of existence is na ahankrita. I am not the performer of the action. Buddhiryasyana lipyate. His buddhi, his intellect, his understanding is not therefore contaminated by that false notion of doing. Lipyate means smeared, or it's not affected by that idea that I am the doer. Because when you think like that, then all manner of things like pleasure, yes, I've achieved so much, pain, oh, I've suffered a setback, and pride enters the buddhi as well, because I have achieved so much. So a person who understands na ahankrita bhavo, my existence is not the creator, I'm free of ahankrita, free of ahankara, then buddhiryasyana lipyate, of a person whose buddhi does not become smeared. And I think, again, what we're witnessing here, I've just thought of this actually this 2 seconds ago, but I think it's right. What we're seeing here is, again, karma yoga, because Krishna has said, na ahankrita bhavo, I am not the doer, I am not the controller. That's the consciousness, the renounced state of mind of the person who is performing karma yoga. And when you perform karma yoga in that way, buddhiryasyana lipyate, of such a person, buddhirna lipyate, the buddhi, the consciousness, the subtle body, the intellect, the understanding is not lipyate. Lipyate means smeared. And what does it become smeared with, affected by? In yogic terms, samskaras. In other words, karma. The thought process of such a person doesn't absorb karma. It doesn't have a karmic impact, because it is renounced action. Na ahankrita bhava. I am not the doer. I am just the Atman, who is the non-doer. Yasya nahankrito bhavo buddhiryasyana lipyate hatvapi sa imalokan. Even though he may hatvapi, even having destroyed this whole world, imalokan, nahanti nani bhajyate. He, is that right? Vapi sa imalokan nahanti nani bhajyate. They are never the killer, and he's never bound by that action. It's going back again to chapter 4 on karma yoga. Karmanya karmayaha pasyada karmanicha karmayaha. Seeing action in the domain of inaction and inaction in the domain of action. Because he may be performing action, he may be performing the most apparently violent action, but because the consciousness is absolutely detached, therefore there is no karmic result of that action, because renunciation is the state of mind, the bhava. Now, of course, as has been pointed out by a number of mainly Western critics of the Gita, this verse here seems to give license to people to perform the most awful actions, and then they can justify that by saying, yes, I was following the Gita's teachings, I was doing it for my country, doing it for my religion, and therefore I killed, I don't know, however many people. but I'm not suffering any bondage or sin from that, because I wasn't doing it for myself. And therefore it can be, you know, a terrorist, for example, a religious terrorist might say, yeah, I did kill 20 people, but it wasn't for me selfishly, it was just for the promotion of religion. And that criticism has been leveled in relation to this 17th verse. The point is, and I think that's where the criticism is wrong here, such persons, when they say I'm not attached, it's not true. The person who kills, they say, patriotic violence, I killed for my country, but that means that is a mark of attachment to a country. I am a nationalist. I have a strong emotional attachment to my nation, which designates me. It's a form of expanded attachment, a form of expanded identity, which means that when the action is performed apparently on behalf of the nation to enhance the power of the nation, it's sort of extended selfish desire. It's a form of extended selfishness. And also the idea that if my nation is powerful and glorious, then I, as a member of that nation, bask in the reflected glory of my powerful nation. You saw that in Britain in the 19th century, when the majority of the population were living in abject poverty while the few enjoyed incredible wealth, but they were able to bask in the reflected glory. Yeah, I may be starving on the streets, but my nation is the greatest nation on earth. So you see what I mean? It's extended attachment, it's extended desire. And likewise for religion as well. Religion in that sense is a form of factionalism. I want my religion to be accepted as the greatest religion, better than your religion, etc. We see this constantly developing, don't we, in religious traditions, this supremacism that inherits them. I'm talking to my son today about this. Missionary activities. Why missionaries going off all over the world? The fundamental idea behind missionary work is we are better than you. Our religion is better than yours, and therefore we want to destroy your culture and religion because we are better than you. So although they may say we're doing this action not selfishly, if you look at it in a little more depth, it is selfish, because they are able to ahankrita bhava, feel that sense of pride and superiority. I have the greatest religion. Me and my fellow religionists are the only ones who are blessed by God. We are superior to all these other inferior religions. You can see this is subtle consciousness that's at work. So what Krishna's talking about is here, na ahankrita bhava. None of that sense of I, be it individual I, me and what I've achieved, or be it extended I, which I do for my nation is great, or my religion is greater than your religion. It's still ahankrita bhava, this idea of pride, selfishness, and the desire for supremacy. It's the most subtle thing, and it's the most corrupting influence. You see, the history of religion is dominated by that. I've got reading here Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, and he details how Christianity in the early years, when it was adopted by the Roman emperors, how quickly it became corrupted into a kind of a power structure in which people killed themselves just to establish the supremacy, not of Christianity, but of their particular interpretation of Christianity. It's extremely corrupting. And so when people make that claim that I'm not doing it for myself, I'm not killing for selfish reasons, I'm doing it for my religion or for my nation or my tribe or something like that, that's not what Krishna's talking about here. He's talking about na ahankrita bhava, which is real detachment from self and extended selfishness. I think that's important to understand this verse and show why those criticisms of the Bhagavad-gītā, although they sound convincing at first listening, they're actually based on a misunderstanding of what Krishna's saying. So, yasya naham krito bhavo, buddhir yasya nalipyate, vapi sa imalokan nahanti nani bhajyate. Now, continuing with this theme of action, Krishna now gives the three impulses which impel us towards taking action: Jnanam, Jnayam, Parigyāta, Trividha, Karma Chodana. So Trividha, three types of Karma Chodana, which are impulses to action. What causes action to take place? What is it that action, which gives rise to action? So three things: Jnanam, knowledge; Jnayam, that which is known; Parigyāta, Parigyatri, the person who knows. In other words, and I think again Krishna's making a very important point here, he's showing again that action isn't physical. Action takes place on the level of consciousness, because before the physical action is only the final stage of it. Prior to that, there's all the mental ideas that are flowing through, which eventually become manifest physically. But prior to that, there's jnanam, there's knowledge. So, you know, if I, for example, I don't know, if I have a desire to eat an apple, jnanam, there is knowledge of where the apple is to be found in the tree. Jnayam, there is that which is known, which is the apple itself, which is red and looks sweet. And then there is Parigyatri, which is myself. I know about the apple. And when those three factors are there, then the action will be taking place. This is what takes place on a mental level, which then, only then, becomes manifest physically. So Jnanam, Jnayam, Parigyāta, Trividha, Karma Chodana, the three factors which cause action to take place: the knowledge of an object, the object itself, and the person who knows the object. All those three combine, and then action takes place in relation to that object. Jnanam, Jnayam, Parigyāta, Trividha, Karma Chodana. Karnam, Karma, Karteti, Trividaha, Karma Sangraha. So again, Trividaha, three types of things, Karma Sangraha, that the action itself, the physical performance of the action, we've had the impulse that makes action take place, threefold, Jnanam, Jnayam, Parigyāta. Now we have the action itself defined in three terms. Karanam, the instruments; karma, the action itself; karanam, karma, karteti, and the kartri, the person who performs the action, the physical person. These are the three components of the action itself. So Krishna here is very cleverly and very subtly analyzing action at a mental level, and then when it becomes manifest at a physical level. At the mental level, there is knowledge of an object which creates desire, attachment, or aversion. So then there is the object itself, something pleasant, a tasty fruit, or unpleasant rotting material. And the Parigyatri is the person who experiences that, sees the fruit, smells the flower, smells the unpleasant aroma. So these things take place within the mind, and they are the impulses. When these are in place, then action takes place. I pick the fruit, or I take myself away from the rotting material and avoid it thereby. And the action itself consists of the instruments that I might have to use to perform the action itself that I do, and then the person, the physical person who performs the action. Okay, so in that way, again, Krishna's thoroughly defined the causes of action, the causes of result, the impulses that give rise to action, and the factors involved in the performance of the action itself. Yeah, Jnanam Jayam Parigata Trivida Karma Chodana Karnam Karma Karteti Trividaha Karma Sangraha. Sangraha means a collection, collectively comprise the action. Action, what does action physically consist of? It is the instrument, the action itself, and the performer of action. Trividaha Karma Sangraha. Now, Krishna now moves on again, and he's sort of looking a little bit back to chapter 17 and the types of analysis that he was doing in relation to the three gunas. Now, he's talked about knowledge as the impulse for action. We know something, we like it or we don't like it, and as a result we act. Jnanam, karma, the physical action itself, and then the karta, the performer of the action. And each one of these components of action, as you might say, again, can be subdivided in relation to the three gunas of sattva, rajas, and tamas. So it's sort of continuing what was said in chapter 17, but now it's being applied to the subject of the 18th chapter, which is the performance of action. Okay, so Jnanam Karma Chakarta Cha Trividaha Tridaiva Guna Bedataha. So Tridaiva Guna Bedataha. Each of these things, knowledge, jnana, karma, the action, karta, the performer of action, each one of those can be divided up, guna bedataha, divided in accordance with the three gunas. Guna bedata, jnanam, karma, cha karta, cha tridaiva guna bedataha, procyate, guna sankyane. These are described in the analysis, the guna sankhya, the analysis of the gunas. Procyate guna sankyane yatavach trinu tanyapi. Now hear about these, shrinu, imperative. Now listen, Arjuna, and listen to these yatavat as they are properly understood. In other words, it's just this verse, which I think is 19. It's just giving an introduction to the next 9 verses, really, which provide a threefold analysis of each of those three factors, making a total of 9 verses. So now we start off with jnana, and here again Krishna's back to the original pattern of first of all speaking about jnana, which is sattvic, then rajasic knowledge, and finally tamasic knowledge. He comes to, and then he does the same with the action itself, with karma, and then with the performer of action. And well, but I think what we'll notice again is a point I've made before. It comes out very clearly in this next set of 9 verses, is the way that sattva guna, which was said in chapter 14 to be one of the causes of bondage in this world, the way that sattva guna is elevated from that status to be shown to be a key part of the spiritual path. Because, and well, let's go and, but notice that it relates to karma yoga, and it relates to spiritual wisdom, spiritual knowledge as well. All of that spiritual knowledge also is derived from sattva guna. So we may be a bit dismissive of sattva guna, thinking it's just part of this world. It's what is that? Krishna, I can't remember the exact verse. In chapter 14, Krishna said that sattva binds the embodied being. But here we're seeing that, yes, it does, but it also releases. Sattva is part of the bondage, but it's also a factor that leads to release from bondage. Okay, so Sarvabhuteshu yenaikam bhavam avyayam ikshate avibhaktam vibhakteshu Tajganam Vidi Sattvikam. So the final phrase is Tajganam Vidi Sattvikam. Know this Ghana, this knowledge, to be Sattvic. Vidi, it's an imperative. It means understand this, that the knowledge given in this verse is Sattvic Gyan. Okay, Sarvabhuteshu yenaikam bhavam avyoyam ikshite. What it means is all living beings, Sarvabhuteshu, in all living beings, by which ekam yenaikam bhavam, in all living beings, ekam bhavam is perceived. A single state of being is perceived. So what Krishna is saying here is that conventional knowledge, conventional knowing, is based on a perception of living beings which perceives variety. I see a man, I see a woman, I see a black man, I see a white man, I see a Chinese man, I see a cow, a horse, a dog, a cat, etc. So in all living beings, I see variety. But what the Sattvic Jnana that Krishna's analysed here is Sarvabhuteshu yena aikam bhavam avyayam ikshate, is perceived, ikshate, ekam bhavam avyayam, a single state of being which is unchanging. Because the idea is that the externals of our existence, the external bhav, here I am, this is my bhav, this is my existence, this is an Englishman of a certain age who lives in a certain town, this is the bhava, and you can see, you know, I look English. So that's one, but then you'll see another man sitting there who looks like an Indian man. So you're seeing a distinction between us, but because we seem to exist differently, we have a different mode of existence, a different state of being. But what Krishna's saying here is that the higher knowledge, the Sattvic Jnana, sees no distinction. It sees only ekam bhavam avyayam, only one changeless, avyaya state of being. In other words, the Sattvic Jnana gives us spiritual perception. And it reminds me, there's a passage in the Mahabharata where a female rishi called Sulabha approaches King Janaka to discuss with him, and he asks her, he said, well, what's going on? How come you're a woman, an independent woman roaming around? And she says to him, oh, I thought you were an enlightened king, but what I see is that when you observe a person, you assess them in terms of the outward appearance. You see me as woman, but the higher wisdom sees me as Atman alone, the ekam bhavam avyayam, this one unchanging identity which transcends the temporary limited identity of man and of woman. So that's the point that's being made here. Sarvabhuteshu yenaikam bhavam avyayam ikshate avibhaktam vibhakteshu. Avibhakta, not divided, not different. Vibhakteshu, in all the different living beings. Avibhaktam vibhakteshu. This knowledge sees us that there is no difference, even when we're perceiving different living beings. Even when I perceive a woman, even when I perceive a man, in those different, apparently superficially different states of being, I'm seeing avibhakta, undivided, because the woman is Atman, the man is Atman. So therefore, I'm seeing bhavam ekam avyayam. I perceive one single, unchanging type of bhava, of form of existence. Now, you see, this is the point I was making before, isn't it? This wisdom, this knowledge is, in Sankhya terms, the Viveka Gyan. It's understanding the true nature of our existence as changeless spiritual entities beyond bodily designation. But this knowledge, this higher spiritual, enlightening, liberating wisdom is Tajjnana Vidi Sattvikam. That knowledge of that type is sattvic. So again, the point I was making, let's have some praise for the sattva guna because it brings enlightening knowledge. Okay. Sarvabhuteshu yenakam bhavam avyayam ikshite avibhaktam vibhakteshu tajganam vidi sattvikam pritaktvena tuyajganam pritaktvena tuyajganam pritaktvena tuyajganam nana bhavan pritakvidan viti sarveshu bhuteshu tajganam vidi rajasam. So this knowledge, vidi, understand, is rajas knowledge. Okay, pritak means different, distinct. I'm sure you can see where this is going in this. Pritaktvena, with differences, by means of difference. Pritaktvena tuyajganam. So that knowledge which is based on differentiating. The sattvic knowledge saw no difference. It saw just one soul identity. But this knowledge, the rajasic knowledge, is based on perceiving distinctions. Pritaktvena tuyajgana. Nana bhavam pritakvidan. Various bhavas, various states of being of different types. Bhavan, pritakvidan, of various types. So this knowledge is the conventional knowledge that we employ moment by moment. When we look out, we see a cat in the garden, we see a bird, we see a man, we see a woman, we see a black man, a white man, etc. We're pritakva. We're seeing all these different types, and because we don't have the higher spiritual wisdom that is brought through immersion in the sattva guna, therefore we perceive a world of distinction, and this is the knowledge that is influenced by rajas. Pritaktvena tuyajganam nana bhavam pritakvidan viti sarveshu bhuteshu. It understands it in all living beings. Now, of course, as we live moment to moment by moment, just in order to properly interact, we have to make distinctions. We can't go into the ladies' toilet, can we? Thinking, well, we're all Atman, ladies, men. I'll just go in the ladies' toilet. It's usually a bit cleaner than the gents. Don't know where that idea came from, but you know what I mean. You just in conventional terms, we have to live that way. And that's why I think Krishna uses the verb veti, knows. In other words, what he's saying is, although we have to live in this world according to the conventions of differentiation between different types of living being, you know, I'm not going to marry a dog or something like that. I'm going to marry a woman because I'm seeing a woman as different from a dog. You see the point? But nonetheless, veti, the higher understanding is that they are all one. But the lower understanding based on rajas is the understanding that the difference is real and absolute. That woman is existentially different from man. That is her nature. That is permanent. We don't have any understanding of the higher spiritual identity. So that's why Krishna says veti sarveshu bhuteshu. He understands all living beings based on that concept of differentiation, rather than the Upanishadic wisdom, the Sankhya wisdom, the Vedanta wisdom of the unity of all life because of its spiritual identity as Atman or as Brahman. So therefore Krishna says, pritaktvena tuyajganam nana bhavan pritakvidan veti sarveshu bhuteshu. He understands it in all living beings. Tajganam vidi rajasam. Okay, and then the third type. Can you get any lower? Yes, you can indeed. Let's see. Yatu kritsna vadekasmin karya shaktam ahoitakam atat vartavad alpamcha tatta masam udahitam. That is understood as tamasa. That knowledge. So this is a little different, and I think it's slightly more difficult verse to understand, but I think I know what Krishna's saying here. Yat tu kritsnavad ekasmin karye. Now, karya is a causal factor. Ekasmin karye means in a single causal factor. Kritsnavad, as if it was everything, as if it was the sole thing. Yatu kritsnavad ekasmin karye saktam ahoitakam. So the understanding, the knowledge that attaches itself to a single causal factor, as if it was everything, as if it was the whole causal factor, if one of the causal factors was the only causal factor, you might say. And this, of course, is going back to what was previously said about the 5 causal factors. And it's ahoitakam. Hoitika means based on reasoned analysis, a reasoned understanding of causes. Ahoitakam means without any reason. It just attaches itself ignorantly to a single cause of factor and is unable to expand its understanding beyond that single fixation. To my mind, and I don't know if this is the intended meaning, but what it draws to mind is blind faith in religion. And I know we've encountered that, particularly those of us perhaps who've lived in the United States, but maybe I shouldn't say that. But you do encounter people who have a blind faith. The Bible tells us everything that is true. And you say, why is that? You say, that's what I believe. And there's no reasoning. It's a hoitika. Whereas what Krishna's arguing for is a reasoned argument. That's what he's presenting here. It's all really close analysis, reasoned analysis. There's no demand for one blind faith. But anyway, what he's saying here is, I think, relates back to verse 14 and 15, the 5 causal factors. A person may latch onto them. Sakta means attached or latch onto in popular discourse. Karye ekasmin, onto one causal factor. Ahoitakam, without thinking it through properly, unreasonably, not embarking on a proper analysis. Atat vartavad. Tattva means truth. Tattvavat means endowed with truth. Atat vartavad means not based on truth or proper understanding. Alpamcha. Alpam means small, limited understanding. So that knowledge which is very limited, confined within narrow parameters. Narrow-minded is exactly what Krishna says. I believe this. This is my conclusion. I'm not going to go beyond that and expand. I think what's being called for here in the pursuit of knowledge is broad-mindedness. Look at all the possibilities. Consider it. Know it. Don't confine yourself and say, this must be true. And I maybe perhaps apply this to religious people, but I think you can apply it to atheists as well. You'll meet atheists who are terribly narrow-minded. They won't contemplate or even consider anything beyond the narrow parameters of truth that they've set for themselves. Anything beyond that is not even going to think about it. That's what it is. It's limited knowledge, whereas true knowledge expands and considers all sources of knowledge. And that's what I think is what Krishna's saying here. Yes, I've forgotten the verse now, what it started off with. Yat tu kritsnavada ekasmin karye saktam ahoitakam. That unreasoning knowledge, that dogmatic knowledge that is insensible to reasoned argument, ahoitakam, atat vartavad. It's not endowed with the purpose of truth. Alpamcha, it's petty, it's limited knowledge. Tat tamasam udahitam. That is what is said to be tamasic knowledge. And I think that's really, again, so often I think these verses are skipped over a little bit. They're not drawn out fully. They're not the best known verses of the Gita, but when you take a little time to consider exactly what's being said here, it's absolutely bursting out with meaning and insights. And I think that, again, this idea of the tamas knowledge as being knowledge which imposes narrow parameters on what we are willing to contemplate and accept. Ekasmin karye, there is only one cause. I'm not having anything else. It's atat vartavad. It limits our ability to perceive the truth. So, you'll meet someone else, and when you say that a higher knowledge comes through yoga, you might say that that's what it says in Yoga Sutras and in Gita, a different way of knowing. No, I'm not even going to consider that. That's out of the question. I'm drawing lines here about what I will allow within the domain of knowledge. And what Krishna, I think, is urging here is go beyond that. Be open to all possibilities. Don't be dogmatic. Hoitakam, reason, think, reach proper conclusions, not ahoitakam, beyond reason, beyond the power of reason. So again, I think some really interesting ideas that we encounter there. But that's Krishna's threefold analysis of jnana, the first of those three factors. Next, he comes on to analyze, along similar lines, the nature of the action itself. And again, we will see how he shows us that the sattva guna, yes, it is a cause of bondage, but it's also the gateway to liberation from bondage. It has both those functions. But at 1 minute past 9, it's a good place to stop, up at the end of verse 22 there, isn't it? And we'll look next week then at the action itself, analysed under the three headings of the gunas, and the nature of the performer of action, the karma and the kartri there. But we will stop for tonight, and hopefully you can listen in again next week, and we'll carry on with chapter 18. But anyway, thanks for listening. Good evening and namaste.